Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Monday, April 3rd, 2017. I want you to hold on to your hats, your horses, or anything else that you need for stability, because your humble host is going to open the news and comment podcast today by agreeing with Trump. Don't worry, I don't think that I need psychiatric care. It is just a momentary convergence of views. The New York Times reported over the weekend that several White House sources have confirmed that the Trump administration is abandoning the incoherent policy of the Obama administration related to Syria. And as you know, I'm sharply critical of just about everything Trump does. I don't think that he's in touch with reality for the most part. But this is a realistic view of the situation in Syria. And I'm consistent here. If you want to go back a couple of years, I criticized Barack Obama repeatedly for what I called his incoherent strategy in Syria. The cockamamie idea that you can take out the insurgents represented by the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and numerous different militant groups, and at the same time bring down the regime, we call it a regime when we don't like them, the government of Bashar al-Assad. Now, I'd like to see Assad go. I have no book for Bashar. But it was just crazy as Obama kept holding out that, we're going to vanquish the Islamic State and Assad's got to go. Well, what are you going to put in if Assad does go? And what if somebody manages to kill him and there is a power vacuum? We have another failed state like Libya, like Yemen, like Iraq on a bad day, like Afghanistan every frickin' day. And so I don't know that Trump is going to come up with a decent policy towards Syria. We haven't seen any evidence of his secret plan. And he is certainly authorizing the wanton killing of many people by American air raids in Iraq, in Yemen, in Somalia. But on the narrow issue about official U.S. policy toward the Assad government, I agree with Trump. And I don't expect to say that very much in the future. Here's where I sharply disagree with his embrace of Obama policy. Today, the Trump White House is welcoming Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the military dictator of Egypt, who is even more powerful and extreme than the military dictator who reigned there for over 20 years, named Hosni Mubarak. I'm having trouble with names today. Hosni Mubarak. And, of course, you know that in 2013, the first freely elected leader of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, was deposed in a military coup led by al-Sisi. But the Obama administration refused to call it a coup. They said, the people were restless, and the general intervened at the right time. And it's interesting to see the carefully selected language of the New York Times in reporting this. Sisi will visit on Monday, the first time since seizing power in Cairo in a military takeover in 2013. The word coup is real easy, and everybody understands it. But they just call it a takeover. And later in the same article, they say, as an army general, Mr. Sisi helped lead the overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi's democratically elected government, and then won the presidency himself in an election tainted by the wide-scale arrest of opposition figures. That's a coup, friends. He's a military dictator. But all of the issues that Obama kind of papered over are now just eviscerated. So there was a human rights standard that the U.S. attempted to articulate following the Arab Spring, and of course Obama gave a speech in Cairo 3 years before that. But all that was washed away, and of course it is because American foreign policy is dictated by Israel. And Cairo, the Egyptians, have been strong allies of Israel in the region despite many cultural and religious differences. And that's the bottom line, why we can't call the coup in Egypt in 2013 a coup. And here's another ugly legacy of the Obama administration. We learned over the weekend that on Friday, a 3-judge panel of the Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia, one of the most conservative and powerful appeals courts in the United States, has issued a ruling that I can only call perverse for its rationale and absurd. They have overturned the ruling of District Court Judge Gladys Kessler, who had ordered that the videotapes of some 40 incidents of force-feeding of prisoners at Guantanamo Bay should be released to the public. And John Eisenberg, who has always been accessible and has talked with me many times over the years, first about the Al-Haramain case, where they could prove that they were wiretapped, and then the case that he took on as a pro bono attorney in the Guantanamo bar. And the purpose of releasing these grisly, contemptible videos of the force-feeding of people is to show the human rights abuses that continue to occur at Guantanamo. And the court wants to pull a curtain over that, and here's their rationale. The government argued that the videos could be used in propaganda to incite violence against Americans and to recruit terrorists. Then shut the goddamn prison down. I mean, this is just so irrational, incoherent. The ruling, this was written by Judge Raymond Randolph. Extremists have used Guantanamo Bay imagery in their propaganda and in carrying out attacks on Americans. For example, the Islamic State beheaded American journalists wearing orange jumpsuits commonly associated with Guantanamo Bay detainees. Then shut the goddamn place down. Don't erect a curtain of secrecy when we know what went on. I mean, this infantilizes every American citizen. Oh, they have to protect us from the dirty deeds that our government has committed in order to protect us further from the way that enemies and opponents might try to use that video footage. And so the injustice that our government has committed repeatedly at Guantanamo will go unaddressed behind the pretense that this stuff is secret and that making it public could be used against us. I apologize for my language, but it infuriates me. News breaking from St. Petersburg, Russia today, the hometown of one Vladimir Putin. And Vlad was visiting his hometown to give a speech. He was a few miles away from the metro station where a subway train exploded. Apparently a bomb blast. At least 10 people were killed, dozens have been injured, and Putin, of course, was several miles away in St. Petersburg, not in any way affected by the incident. But in totalitarian Russia, this kind of action, which will likely be blamed on Chechen separatists or maybe Trump operatives, I don't know, is quite unusual. Meanwhile, the Trump-Russia inquiry here in the United States is meandering along. The House Intelligence Commission is basically stalled now because of the antics of Devin Nunes playing Maxwell Smart or Inspector Clouseau. We're not really sure which detective he was trying to emulate. But Adam Schiff, who is the Democratic ranking member of the House Intelligence Commission, and the committee, the guy who has surfaced here as the adult in the room, was interviewed on Sunday, and he says he thinks that Nunes did this to divert attention from Moscow's actions and that it might likely have been orchestrated by the White House. And Nunes may have been a pawn sucked into this, but he really has compromised himself so badly that, as you know, I've called for his complete resignation from the Intelligence Committee, not just a recusal or stepping down as the chair. And Schiff says that this is an attempt to distract the public from concerns over potential links between Trump and Russian meddling. Now, it's very clear that the agendas are different. The Republicans want to stick to the issues of what they consider to be intentional, devastating leaks. And there are issues with leaks. There's no question about that. They say it's coming from the rearguard embedded Obama operatives inside and outside the government. And there may be some merit to that claim. Let's investigate. The Democrats, on the other hand, want to talk about Russia's alleged meddling in the election, the hacking of the DNC server, and they really don't have a strong hand to play. They don't have a lot of evidence, and so let's investigate. But clearly, they're not on the same page, and this public split is really, I think, a definition of the different agendas. Now, right-wing media is trying to change the subject to the fact that Obama's national security advisor, Susan Rice, allegedly, according to logs, was the person who unmasked the identities of some of the Americans who were caught up in the intercepts of phone calls with Russians. And Schiff says that the information that he viewed at the White House that Nunes had seen earlier in the week doesn't unmask most of the people in there. It was done by inference by Nunes. So we now have he said, she said, he said, he said, and it certainly is a mess. The Senate Intelligence Committee trying to act like adults, but they are no less tainted, in my view, than the folks in the House are. And Schiff got it right. In a quote on Friday, he said, the White House is yet to explain why senior White House staff apparently shared these materials with Nunes and described that as with but one member of either committee, only for their contents to be briefed back to the White House. This is the bizarre part. Okay, the White House is a suspect. And if you're investigating, you have the role of a prosecutor or a police investigator, a detective, and you don't share information with a suspect. So this taints the process. It possibly taints evidence that might have come from these intercepts, and who knows who the evidence would be most beneficial to. Meanwhile, the story that roiled the Beltway last week of former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn investigating the possibility of getting immunity before he testifies before a Senate or House Intel committee in the Russia-Trump investigation. And the latest is that congressional investigators seem to be wary of giving him immunity. They say it's too early in their investigation, and that while there have been some talks apparently initiated by Mike Flynn's attorneys, both committees are saying that no offer of immunity has been made at this point. So that continues to be a fascinating thread. We'll see who pulls on it first and hardest. Meanwhile, a delicious Twitter war has broken out among Republicans based in Washington in response to these silly Trump tweets, where he said the Freedom Caucus has to get on the team and fast. Well, Freedom Caucus members decided to piss back on the pissee. And I guess he's the pisser here. At any rate, over the weekend, Justin Amash, who is a conservative Republican House member from Michigan. I have agreed with him on Fourth Amendment issues, and he is a good opponent of domestic surveillance. Beyond that, he's a hardline conservative/libertarian, and he's now tweeting back at Trump. Oh, real Donald Trump is bringing auto plants and jobs back to Michigan. Justin Amash is a big liability. Defeat him in a primary. Now, that's actually the tweet from a White House aide who is the director of social media, whose name is Dan Scavino. So then Amash responds, Trump admin and establishment have merged into Trump-stablishment. Same old agenda, attack conservatives, libertarians, and independent thinkers. So really, guys, go at it. Don't let me get in the way. I'm not going to follow any of this Twitter BS, but that's how they choose to spend their time. And the Trumper was up at 5 a.m. today, started tweeting at 1:15. And he's hammering the media because Fox and Friends is the only media outlet that gets it right. One of the tweets was, such amazing reporting on unmasking and the crooked scheme against us by Fox and Friends, spied on before nomination, the real story. Another tweet, at Fox News from multiple sources, there was electronic surveillance of Trump and people close to Trump. This is unprecedented. Now, this shows us a couple of things. Trump doesn't appear to read newspapers. Maybe they bring him clippings. And he appears to only watch Fox. Occasionally, he wanders over to NBC to smack Chuck Todd, and once in a while we hear him slamming CNN. But he's a TV news junkie, and he really ought to get better sources of information. A judge in Kentucky is allowing a case to proceed against Trump after he made a claim that his free speech rights should cause the lawsuit to be dismissed. At issue is the roughing up of a handful of people, protesters, at a rally last March, that's March of 2016, in Louisville, Kentucky. We've seen the videotape where Trump thundered, "Get him out of here!" And 2 women and a man say they were shoved, punched by audience members as Trump directed them from the platform. Judge David Hale in Louisville ruled on Friday that the suit can proceed. He found that there were ample facts supporting the allegation that the protesters' injuries were, quote, a direct and proximate result of Trump's actions. All right. I'd like to see that one go to term. Meanwhile, the big battle in Washington this week will be in the Senate over the attempt to confirm Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the good news for Democrats is they have secured 41 senators who will support a filibuster. They've had some defections. We know that last week, Manchin of West Virginia, Heitkamp of North Dakota said that they're going to vote for Gorsuch and will not participate in a filibuster. And we've had a couple of people also say, I don't like to filibuster. And that includes Pat Leahy and I think Chris Coons. But the fourth Democrat to defect to supporting Gorsuch is Michael Bennet of Colorado. Well, let me be clear. He said he won't filibuster. We don't know if he's going to vote for or against the nominee. And the other guy who surfaced in support of Trump is the nominal Democrat from Indiana, Joe Donnelly. So the Democrats have enough. But it's not clear if they're going to engage in a talk-till-you-drop filibuster. Because under the rules, they can threaten a filibuster, and the Republicans have to overcome that by getting 60 votes to end debate and move to a vote. Now, we know that Mitch McConnell is itching to use the so-called nuclear option and blow up the cloture rule for Supreme Court nominations, and I think that's likely to happen. It'll happen now or it'll happen next time, and I don't fault Schumer for facing down the bluff to see what happens. But I think we are going to see the change in the Senate rules. And Pat Leahy, who is now the longest-serving member, the dean of the Senate, said, "Now, I respect this institution as much as anyone. I never expected to be here long enough to become dean of the Senate. I've devoted myself to the good of the Senate and what it can accomplish. But I cannot vote solely to protect an institution when the rights of hard-working Americans are at risk because I fear that the Senate I would be defending no longer exists." That is, unfortunately, quite accurate. Every day I like to stop for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Folks like Kevin Beckley, Keith Hull, my favorite Nixon, Pauline, who kicks in $10 a month. Hope you don't mind me bragging about that, Pauline. And also Catherine Hemness, who just renewed her annual subscription. Thank you, one and all, and maybe it's your turn. Come on over to peterbcollins.com, and if you've got a little money in the bank you can send my way, then sign up for a subscription. You hit the menu button, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber, takes you to the sign-up page. That's where our bonus books are displayed for people who sign up for a new annual subscription and share a mailing address here in the continental U.S. I'd love to have your support. Well, the late Friday document dump of ethics disclosures by the current occupants of the White House shows that the Koch brothers and the Robert Mercer family are the sugar daddies of the alt-right. For example, Trump's legislative affairs director got $78,000 from a Koch-linked group called Freedom Partners, and then another $380,000 for consulting work like people at the Club for Growth. Then we've got Steve Bannon. He got $500,000 from entities linked to megadonor Robert Mercer and his daughter Rebecca, including the Breitbart News Network and Cambridge Analytica. That's also a payday for Kellyanne Conway up there at the Analytica. She also got money from a Mercer super PAC called Keep the Promise, and she earned more than $800,000 last year. So they're at the trough, benefiting from the rightward tilt, and it shows who their patrons are and who they are going to serve while they're in government service. And the Mercer's Foundation also kicked in $2 million to pay for the group that hired Peter Schweitzer to dig into the dirt of the Clinton Foundation and expose it. And while I don't like the source of the money, it reminds me of Richard Mellon Scaife, who spent millions to take down Bill Clinton. I do believe that the workings of the Clinton Foundation deserve to be fully exposed and disclosed, and that hasn't happened yet. Also, Citizens United is a group that we know from the pro-Clarence Thomas days, then from the court ruling that evolved from the film that they made about Hillary Clinton in 2008, and they got $3.5 million from the Mercer Family Foundation between 2012 and 2014. So you can see the grip of big money right-wing billionaires on the current White House. Kudos to the New York Times for a powerful editorial in the Sunday paper, which is entitled Pick Your Favorite Ethical Offender. They hit Ivanka Trump and her husband Jared Kushner for their failures to observe the ethics laws that they say that they're complying with. We know that Ivanka is getting some of the profits from the Trump International Hotel, and that is just a clear conflict of interest. No other individual would be permitted to serve in the White House and have an interest in the hotel down the street. They out Carl Icahn, the longtime corporate raider, who is a special advisor on regulatory reform. He's pushing the Trump administration to change an Environmental Protection Agency rule about the blending of ethanol and gasoline that would earn one of his companies $205 million a year. There's no conflict of interest there, is there? Huh? Then there's Scott Gottlieb over at the Food and Drug Administration. He's agreed to recuse himself for only 1 year from any decision the agency takes involving 20 companies that he's been involved with in the recent past. Then we got Sonny Perdue, the former governor of Georgia, who is dragging a trail of controversies into his appointment. And Steve Bannon, who said that he wouldn't have any contact with Breitbart after he left. Well, he's not honoring that pledge either. So we do need to keep score on this because they are so arrogant and dismissive of the rule of law. And I believe someday all of these issues will be aired out in a courtroom and we'll find violations of the law. But it's going to take time and some gutsy prosecutors. Meanwhile, in Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, who's the governor now, used to be a member of Congress. He's a knuckle-dragging, pandering to evangelical kind of guy. And he signed another law about abortion that is clearly unconstitutional. The new law bans sex-selection abortions, and it requires a doctor to ask a woman seeking an abortion if she knows the sex of the fetus she is carrying, and if she does, to tell her it's illegal to choose an abortion based on that information. Now, are they going to give somebody a polygraph test? Because even if somebody is intending to abort a fetus because of its sex, that is a private decision. That's what Roe versus Wade ensures. And this is clearly an effort by the pro-birth people who are trying to create provocative cases to run up to the Supreme Court so that Neil Gorsuch can tip the balance and help erode, if not eliminate, abortion rights in this country. Well, over at Fox News, they just keep writing checks to women who have been sexually harassed or abused while working there. There's a new claim against Roger Ailes, who was bounced from Fox News last summer, and it's a 17-page suit in New York State Supreme Court against Roger Ailes and Bill Shine, the network's co-president. And this is coming from a former Fox News contributor, Julie Roginski. And in Sunday's New York Times, they published the results of an investigation that found that 5 women have made allegations of sexual harassment or inappropriate behavior against Bill O'Reilly. and the payouts have totaled $13 million, and he still works there. Fox is so inflexible, when it comes to any liberal standards, but when it comes to the sexual proclivities of their stars, oh, well, that's a different story. Meanwhile, down the dial at MSDNC, they're gloating. Full-page color ad in the New York Times on Sunday. MSNBC beat CNN in March. Well, let them gloat. I'm sure they're thrilled that their ratings are up. They're beating CNN. Rachel Maddow, when she dragged out Trump's tax returns in a way that undermined her credibility. That was her most watched show ever. And so MSDNC has made the calculated decision to chase ratings at the expense of their credibility. Not that they always had a lot of credibility, but now it just doesn't matter. So much of their coverage is based on unproven speculation, spun up in the direction of democratic interests. In Venezuela, we reported to you on Friday that the Supreme Court has essentially neutered the assembly. But over the weekend, the Supreme Court kind of walked back and watered down its decision. They say they have not divested the parliament of its powers, and that they have suppressed parts of the earlier decision to nullify the legislature and allow the court to write laws itself. Now, the impression created by the American media is that Nicolas Maduro, the president, is consolidating power. He is vanquishing his opponents who spent all of last year trying to get him impeached. And he is becoming a strongman, if not a dictator. And the court apparently is having a hard time deciding which side they're on and how far to go. And finally today, you know that Gibraltar is the island at the mouth of the Mediterranean. It has been controlled by Britain since 1713, and it is called the Rock. Well, because of Brexit, Spain has made a play at the European Union, saying that if Britain leaves the EU, which they're in the process of doing, then the EU has to side with Spain in their dispute over Gibraltar, and Spain wants it back. So this is an ancient dispute. I don't know if it's going to be resolved in the current resolution of Brexit, but I do have this dramatic offer. I would like to trade the Rock, Dwayne Johnson, to Spain to see if they'll accept him instead of claim on Gibraltar. Now, he's the highest-grossing movie star ever. I've never paid a dime to see any of his flicks, and he survived an April Fool's death hoax that was passed around the internet over the weekend. So, just to recap, Dwayne Johnson is alive and well, and I would love to trade him to Spain for Gibraltar. Any takers? Thanks for joining me for my news and comment podcast today. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.
I believe that if you can't say something nice about a person, you shouldn't say anything at all.
Keep smiling.